Yeah. I wish they'd stop. It's so insane.
It's so frustrating.
Stupid.
Well, thank you
But
so much
anyway,
for making the time. Thank you for
yeah.
Becca. Welcome to the podcast. Before we start, I like to kick off with the question, how do you, Becca, keep yourself well?
How do I keep myself well?
Hmm.
Lots of ways. Meditation, hiking, two big ones.
Oh, perfect.
Two, two of the biggest. Yeah.
Where are you located that you're getting some good
I'm
hike?
in I'm in BC, so in the interior BC, so in right in the mountains, in the
Beautiful.
Rocky Mountains separating BC from Alberta. So
Oh, that's a beautiful place to hike. And what type of meditation do you do?
I do yoga meditation, Kriya yoga.
Oh, what kind of yoga?
Kriya,
I've
Ariya, Kriya yoga. Yeah.
never heard of that. What is that like?
It's it's taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, who was the author of Autobiography of a Yogi, and he moved from India to California in 1920 and wrote a bunch of books. And he died in 1952, but he's still his ashram and his retreat centers are still going strong in California and across the country. So
Wow.
I learned how to meditate by taking his lessons, and I go on retreat, silent retreat at his ashram down in California periodically. And he teaches Kriya yoga. It's really just a way to connect with our ourselves, our spirits. Yeah,
Wow, how beautiful. How long is the longest silent retreat that you've done?
10 days.
Oh, okay. I just spoke with a friend who is facilitating yoga here, and she does 10-day silent retreats. I'm like, I think I could do that, but it would be a challenge.
It's amazing. It's
Is it
actually only challenging for the first couple days. You really
that's
do get.
that's what I've heard. Anyone listening to this is probably laughing out loud that I just said I think I could be silent for 10 days because they've never heard me talk for 5 minutes. So I can't wait to talk about your story in your book. To Professor is a strong title and what called
Yeah.
you to your book. So take me back to the younger version of you. How did you find yourself in sex work originally?
Yeah, this is the story. When I graduated high school, I grew up in a small town, and I decided to go to the city, Vancouver, and make my way in the world. So back then, is the 80s, there were, we used newspapers, and I thought, okay, I need a job, right? That's what I need is a job. I need money. And I was looking for work. I really didn't know what I was going to do, but I kept seeing this big ad in the paper that said, become an exotic dancer, make $500 a week. And I remember thinking, oh my God, I'd be rich if I had $500 a week. Right. And I saw it, ignored it. I ended up getting a job selling Kirby vacuum cleaners door to door.
Oh, wow.
And this Kirby vacuum cleaners, I don't even know if they make them anymore. They're very heavy. And I'm packing this vacuum cleaner. I did the training, and I'm going door to door with these guys. I was the only girl. I'm a little girl. I'm like 18. And after 3 weeks, I finally sold one vacuum. I made $300 commission. And I was still looking for better work, right? But I didn't have money for college or anything like that. Nobody in my family went to college. And I kept seeing this stupid ad, and it just haunted me day and night. And I went to my dad. I was staying with my dad because I was raised with my mom. He let me stay with him. I'd never lived with him. He just said I could stay there until I got on my feet. And I knew he had been single his whole life, and that he went to strip clubs and did, because he talked about it all the time. So I showed him the ad. I said, what do you think about this? He said, oh, you could do that. You could totally do that. He said, let me take you out and I'll show you what it's like. And so we went bar hopping. I was 18, I was underage. And I'll never forget, he saw the look on my face and cracked up laughing because I didn't realize that they took everything off, like everything. And I was so shocked, and he thought it was hilarious. And he said, oh yeah, don't forget, this is not a titty show, it's a clitty show. And that was like the first and only piece of advice I ever got from my father.
Oh,
And it, you know, the obvious things come to mind. He could have said, why don't you go to college? Or why don't you try this? Instead, he said, you could so do this. Just remember, the advice. Anyway, long story short, I ended up doing it. And it turns out later, I found out my mom was running an escort service. I ended up working for her later. We ended up working together. My sister worked for her. And yeah, like there's I don't know how much detail you want, but that was the beginning of it. And I started when I was 18, and I did my last, I quit and went to go to college when I was 32. So it was a long haul.
Wow, I can't imagine. And that familial aspect
Yeah.
really complicating things. Was that something that stopped you from leaving sooner?
No, I got so into the work immediately. So that night, as a matter of fact, we were drinking all night, and I was immediately hooked on. I just thought, oh man, this is the best I've felt in my whole life, because I was incredibly nervous, socially awkward, always stressed, always, I just, and I was drinking. I feel great. And I was basically an instant alcoholic. I mean, I discovered that actually does happen. It was just there waiting to be born. And I just got into the world, Callie, and into the depths of it, and drugs, alcohol, bikers, the streets. I wasn't just stripping, but also, and just right into through my 20s, my whole 20s from 18 to 32. I ended up in psych wards and detox centers and hospitals, and it was awful. There's a lot of story in there, right? But yeah, it was addiction for me, right from the beginning, I
Well,
think.
and then the
And just
money.
not knowing what else to do, and having, and yeah, the family, like having that connection. Oh, you're good, right? So, my mom had the escort service, and my stepdad would drive us around to motels, and we anyway, you get the point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then with the addiction, the money, fueling that, and then I can imagine it's like an impossible cycle to get out of, especially if
Yeah.
you, doesn't sound like you had people around you saying like, hey, we've got better ideas. Like this was the lifestyle you were surrounded by.
Yeah.
So,
In fact, I knew early, sorry for interrupting there. I
mhm.
knew early, I always wanted to go to college. I always thought I could do a bachelor's degree. I know I could. And a couple of times through the years, I'd mention it, and people would just laugh. They thought that was so funny. Oh, she wants to go to college. Ah, it's hilarious. So I would just stop talking about it, because it was like I was embarrassed I was embarrassed of my own ambition. I remember feeling that. I knew that's exactly what it was. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, a classic case of people not wanting to see someone that was at their level then leave them when they're not choosing to make those same decisions for themselves. It's crabs in a bucket, like uh,
Yeah,
so
yeah, yeah, exactly.
when did you decide to leave, and did it take some time for you to actually get to that point of leaving, or one day was it, that's it, I'm done, I've had enough?
No, it was, I wanted out for years before I got out. Uh, yeah, my addiction was so bad near the end, the last 4 years or so, from about late 20s, that I just kept ending up in the hospital. And there were some suicide attempts. I was so unhappy, so miserable, and I tried to get out. But I tried to get out. I don't mean anybody was physically holding me there. I just didn't know what else to do. And the addiction was so strong, I would try to quit drinking and try to quit using drugs and fail. I'd go to detox for a while, try to get help and get a counselor, and then I just didn't, I couldn't. And then finally, I don't know what was different, but I think one of the big things, this is kind of funny, but when I was 32 and I ended up back in detox, I realized, you're too old at 32. Like, I couldn't strip anymore. They didn't want me. They're like, my God, you've been around forever. Go away. Like, just stay away. We don't want you anymore. Because you're over 30. Why are you here? Kind of thing, right? And so I realized, well, I can't even do that anymore. So that leaves me only on the streets, right, or the escort service. And when I went into the detox center for my 11th trip, to detox in 10 years. So I was going about once a year to try and get sober. I don't know, something clicked and I came out, I got a student loan. And my mom, at that point, my mom, when I went and told her, and she said, I will support you. You can do this. And she didn't have the money to support me, but she supported me emotionally. She was there for me. So I got a student loan and I just went for it. I went and took my first course when I was 32 and never stopped. And it wasn't like 4 straight years. There was still ups and downs and like relapses, and it was messy. I
Wow.
say that in my book, that, human transformation is messy.
Right. Well,
It really is messy, or was for me. And the people that I've known that have come through and the women that I work with, I think we want perfection. We want to just go there. I'm done now. I'm going to be different now. And it's messy. Life is messy. Crap
mean,
happens, right?
well, and any change is not linear, let alone when there's
Yeah.
years of addiction and just so many added challenges. May I ask, did your whole family kind of stay in that world after you had made that change?
My sister died. She ended up overdosing and dying. My mom also, she actually worked until she was like 55, and then retired to do gardening, and and then died shortly after breast cancer.
Oh,
And there was, my stepdad's still around. He's in his 80s. He's living up in a home somewhere, and that was really it. There's nobody else.
wow. How incredible that you were able to pave that path for yourself and you just needed one person to be in your corner, like cheerleading you. You can do this. So you get the student loan and make this decision that you're going to fulfill this dream. So what was the dream in terms of academia at that point?
I didn't know. I wanted a bachelor's degree in English. I don't know why, because I was always a reader. It was my escape. My favorite way to escape was a bottle of vodka and a good novel. It's like, reality's gone. I'm in this novel, and yeah, I didn't know. I didn't have a plan. By the time I got my bachelor's degree, or about my 3rd year, I knew I wanted to go to grad school, and I knew I could. I knew how. I was getting good grades. And so I applied to grad schools, got accepted in several, chose the one, went to UBC in Vancouver. And yeah, from there I knew I wanted to teach, because I love the world of academia. I love the atmosphere. Yeah.
Wow. So 32, go to university for the first time, and then go on to get a master's in English. I mean, maybe you just knew that you had this incredible book in you. And so that was the pull to English, you know? So at what age then were you truly starting your career? You were working in education and academia?
38.
I just love that people are sitting there listening to this right now. I'm 33. And so to hear that you 180'd your whole life, what would be not that long ago for me,
Yeah.
I think you had the whole world in front of you. And I think it's so easy for people to get caught up in that, like, I'm too old, it's too late. And look at this life that
Yeah.
you created for yourself. That's
Yeah.
incredible. And now inspiring other people to do.
That is my message. That's one of my messages.
It's incredible. So what is your life like now?
It's really important not to ever say it's too late.
Oh, yes. The time's gonna pass anyways.
Exactly. I think we have a bit of an internet lag. Sorry about that.
Oh no, sorry. If it
Yeah, the time's gonna pass anyway. So what am I doing now? I served, I jokingly say I served 20 years at the college I was teaching at, and I just took early retirement to go full-time helping women get sober, do sobriety coaching, which is amazing. I'm enjoying every minute of it, being independent and helping others. So
I can't imagine how powerful it is for these women to have a role model who has truly walked the talk. Like, you have been in these shoes and, had such dramatic transformation. And I think that must be something much appreciated, more than, not that it's not important and not to undervalue it, but when you have a counselor or a therapist in a room, maybe trying to help you get sober, for example, and maybe they've not experienced it, to have someone who can show the before and after and walk through that fire with them, what a beautiful gift. So do you ever imagine yourself re-retiring now, or is this going to be, and authorship as well, are you going to continue writing and coaching?
Yeah, I am. I'm not 60 yet. I'm getting there, but yeah, my plan actually is to retire. I want to retire about 65. So I want to I'm thinking all 7 years of coaching and just enjoying this life. It's very, very different, being independent, not an employee, because even when you're, teaching, you're still an employee. So it's a very different world, the world of entrepreneurship. But yeah, I definitely want to retire and just do some traveling and relaxing. But I'm thoroughly enjoying working with women right now. I'm meeting so many women. The fact is, Kelly, that very few of the women I work with have had crazy lives like I did. They're most of them are just ordinary women who want to pick up the pieces, who find themselves drinking too much. And one of the biggest struggles, I work with mature women, and a lot of them are being threatened that you can't see your grandchildren if you don't sober up. You can't, or your children. These types of threats are very, very, very heartbreaking. So helping women to just realize they can transform no matter what the age, and get their lives back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What a beautiful message. How do you personally deal with substance now? Is this still something that you feel you have to actively work at every day? Is it quite passive for you at this point?
No, and I talk about this. If we just quit drinking or using drugs, we will be struggling for the rest of our lives. We need to recover.
Mhm.
And I've experienced both. The first few years of my sobriety, I've only been sober since 2018. So I worked as a college professor struggling with alcohol for 15 years. I was a functioning alcoholic, they like to call it, and high functioning. I also drank right through university. So the experience for me was, the first couple of years I thought that the problem is, if you don't recover, you're constantly struggling against addiction, and it's so uncomfortable that you're going to relapse again, or just stay incredibly uncomfortable and incredibly unhappy. And I say, well, if you're going to be that unhappy, you might as well just get drunk. Like, what's the point of all this, right? To be miserable. So we have to recover. That means working on ourselves, working through the things from the past, that whatever we're trying to run from, not everybody's trying to run from something. Some people, we're just addicted, right? So they're, I just really, I have my own little podcast. I don't do interviews. I just do like 10-minute snippets each day to inspire women. So they get their 10-minute little sobriety snippet. And I always say that you must recover. So once you get there, there's no struggle.
Right.
You could lock me in the liquor store overnight and I'd be fine. Like, I just don't care. It's just gone.
I don't know if I've ever heard sobriety talked about in that light, where it's like, yeah, you're not white knuckling forever, like getting to the root of the problem, whatever that catalyst is. So was there a specific catalyst to you getting sober from alcohol in your academic career, or had you just thrown your hands out? Do you mind sharing that?
No.
Like, if only it
That's
was
what,
that easy.
yeah, I know, it's all messy, right? No, I had in 2018, I came home for the Thanksgiving long weekend on a Thursday, because I didn't teach on Fridays, and I did my usual, stopped at the liquor store, grabbed my bottle, start drinking Thursday night, and blacked out and stayed in an alcoholic blackout for 8 days, which I didn't even know was possible. I woke up. I literally came to 8 days later. I had been walking, talking, and drinking and passing out for 8 days. I had to ask my husband. He didn't know I was in a blackout. I missed a week of work because it was the long weekend, the entire week, and then the next weekend. And my students were like at class, and I'm not there. And they went to the dean and said, "Our teacher's not here. Like, what the hell's going on?" And they were trying to find me. They didn't know what happened to me. They were phoning, email. I was just gone. So at the end of that was my bottom. It was like, go get help or your career's over. So that's how intense addiction is.
Wow, serious rock bottom. Well, and that your partner didn't really realize, it sounds, the full extent of it.
He knows he knows that what most people don't know. We cannot argue people out of alcoholism. We can't force them out of it. We can't beg them out of it. We can't beat it out of them. Not that he would. I had former partners who tried that. We can't yell it out of people. He loved it out of me. He tried to love it out of me. He couldn't even do that. So when he saw me, he knew I was drinking. He's like, "Aren't you supposed to be at work?" And I was in a blackout. I'm like, "Oh, leave me alone." I asked him, "Well, what was I?" He said, "You just kept telling me to," I was using bad language, "to go away and leave me alone." And I just sat there and drank for 8 days.
Wow.
Pass out. I didn't pass out long enough to come out of the blackout. So I would pass out, wake up, still in blackout, and keep drinking, and just kept doing that for 8 solid days. And on the 8th day, I came out of the blackout and I said, "What day is it?" And I was doing no personal hygiene. I stunk. My hair was all matted. I was dirty. He said, and he told me the date, and I couldn't even believe it. I was like, "Yeah, it was rock bottom." It's like,
Wow.
okay,
How terrifying.
something's got to happen.
And
So
then,
yeah.
so what was your path to healing and really resolving it then, knowing that obviously previous attempts were not getting you the result that you needed?
Callie, despite that, I knew I had to go do something. So I went on sick leave, obviously. I went straight to the hospital. I had to be medically detoxed because I was on the verge of seizure. I hadn't been eating. So I was in hospital for about 10 days. And from there, I agreed to go to a residential treatment center, which I had resisted my whole life. Just out of stubbornness. I can do it. Leave me alone. I can do it. And while I was in there, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to do this because I didn't know how to be sober. I could stay sober in the hospital. Anybody can stay sober when you're locked up in a treatment center and you can't, it's what you do afterwards. And, I tell the story in my book. I tell most of these stories in my book that when I got out after 8 weeks, the first thing I did was go to the liquor store and buy a bottle. Because why? I don't know, because I don't know why. Well, so the real recovery had to happen for me after that because most addicts are like this too. We don't like being told what to do. Don't tell me I can't drink. If I want to drink, you can't stop me. It's this bizarre, we have to make the decision. And so the fact that I had ended up there sort of against my will, I went, but it was like the college telling me, if you don't go, you're fired. Like, you got to go. And so I went out, I did one more drunk just to prove I could. That's how insane the thinking is. Then I decided, okay, I'm done. And then I started healing. And it was a long, long journey. They had the treatment center was a 12-step program. I couldn't stand it. I have nothing against it. Nothing. I think if it works for people, they should do it. But it wasn't for me. And I knew it wasn't for me because I'd ended up there all my life. I was there. I ended up there when I was 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, And the journey that I went on was mostly through coaching and group and talking to other women. So women who had come before me on this path, who supported me, and other professional women especially, who I felt like such an imposter in my own career that I had one lawyer friend, for example, who told me her story, and she's a well-respected lawyer who had done worse things than I had done. said, "Oh, you want to hear a story?" And when I started realizing I wasn't alone, yeah, so that was only in 2018. So the last 6 years have been an amazing, amazing journey. And I would say I've been truly recovered, past tense, for the last three. The first 3 years were very difficult.
Wow. I can't imagine just that weight, like it to not have this all-consuming thing, which must have felt so hopeless at times. Like if I've had it for this long, how am I ever going to get out? Like that's so hope inspiring for anybody listening, no matter what the addiction or habit or,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
um debilitating, choice. It's amazing. And so what inspired you, and when did you decide, okay, coaching and leading other women through this is the shift? Because that's a big career change out of academia.
I discovered sort of by accident that I was good at it. Women always sort of gravitate towards me, and in my journey through different groups and meeting different women, um, I'm just good at it. I'm good at talking to people and listening, very good at listening to people. I also discovered that I'm good at inspiring people through my podcast. That's why I do it 10 minutes a day. That's not even an ordinary podcast. And the feedback I get is just that I can tell that you know how I feel,
Mm,
right? That's the main feedback. It just felt right. And I think I'd had enough of teaching. Yeah.
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 How beautiful to be able to resonate with people like that. How do people react when you tell them your story? Now, obviously, you're very open about your story. Is is it always something you've been open with? When you were in academia, was it something that felt like a shameful secret?
Totally. It was awful. It was I think one of the reasons I couldn't stop drinking is I was hiding this big, horrible, weird past, and I was an imposter from what if somebody ever found out who I really was, like, oh my God, and the crap that I had done over in those years. And it was all, I couldn't fit in. I couldn't make friends with colleagues. I was always on the out, keeping myself on the out. And it wasn't them, it was me. They tried to befriend me, and I'm like, oh, back off, or don't,
Right.
I'm not one of you. You just think
Right.
I am. It
Like
was bizarre. It was my own insanity, right?
if they get too close, they'll figure out that you're not who
Yeah,
you're presenting.
yeah.
Wow. And when this kind of rock bottom situation happened after the 8-day blackout, obviously this led to having to have this conversation with your higher ups. After
Yeah.
after that, did this conversation come out? Were they supportive of your recovery?
It was, no, not really. So, you know, it's confidentiality. Very few people knew. I had to let HR know,
Mm,
and my dean, and that was it, right? Because I had every right to confidentiality, and alcoholism's an illness. I felt like I was just a big loser and a liar because I drank for 8 days. But I found out afterwards in the treatment center, you're sick. You didn't just lie and cheat and so you could drink for 8 days. You're sick. You have a disease. It's called alcoholism or alcohol use disorder, whatever you want. It's just right. And I'm like, I don't know. You just feel like a kind of a loser. Right. I couldn't buy into I understand it now, but that's how I felt at the time. And so on their side, they knew, oh my God, she's so sick. Let's send her off on sick leave because, I just didn't feel sick. I felt like a loser, right? That's how we feel. We
mm.
do.
Can you remember the first time that you really honestly told your full story to someone and what that experience felt like? Because I can imagine it just would be a million pounds lifted off of you.
You know what? It was the book. It wasn't telling it, it was writing it.
Oh yeah, how cathartic.
I hadn't told anybody that story. And I started writing. Part of my healing, as a matter of fact, it's a huge part of my healing, and it's a huge part of my coaching program, is writing your story, writing your secrets, writing. It was such a healing bomb, and I had no intention of publishing that book. I had no intention of sharing my story. I was going to keep it hidden, but I wanted to somehow get it out. And through working with a couple of other women, and I had a coach, and was like, right, start writing it then. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't talk about it with any of them. I didn't tell any of those stories, any of those secrets. And when I started writing it, what happened was I started seeing my story through 20 something Becca's eyes. And I started empathizing with her, and I started helping her heal. It was like, wait a minute, that isn't even, oh my God, how did you survive that? I started feeling so much compassion for her, whereas before I was just wrapped up in this guilt. And I realized it's not even me. And, that's what I say in my book, that you're not the same person you were in the past. It's not even you. You're just not even, it's not even. And in fact, that's how I feel about it when I think about my past. I think, oh my God, that poor woman, that must have been awful,
Yeah,
right?
who's
Because
that?
it's, yeah. And so I started writing, and then I wrote one story, and I thought that felt good, and I was able to enough about my past. I never lied. So when he read the book, he waited till it was published, and then he bought it on Amazon. I said, I got a copy here. No, I'm getting my own copy. So
Oh, how
he
supportive.
read the book. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I didn't tell it. I
Oh,
wrote it. And then after, I started talking about it with people like you,
wow.
and that was it.
Thank you. Thank you. And how do people generally respond when you tell them about your story?
I mean, that's the funny thing. I thought if anyone ever found out, I'd be ostracized from humanity. I'd be, I'm not fit to walk all this crap, right? Nobody, they react the way you are, Callie, with compassion and understanding. And I mean, maybe it would have been different. It might have been different 20 years ago. I don't know. But I've had nothing but, in fact, there's a part of me that going, aren't you a little shocked? And people are like, no, you're okay. You're okay. We got it. So it's like,
You're like, come on, there's a
okay.
big wow factor to this. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it has come, I'm sure, a long way, and maybe that's part of the challenge, decades before where it didn't stick, because I think too, we're learning more and more about alcoholism and what that looks like. And so you are very clearly not what the stereotypical alcoholic would be, someone who's highly functioning and working in academia at this high level. And I really do feel like we often still assume it's men. And if you
Hmm.
didn't have stories that you could relate to, because of media and film and, just what's portrayed, I can imagine you felt like an island, the only one. So no doubt
Yeah.
these stories and conversations with other women have been so powerful. Is there anything specific that you can tell me about women and alcohol use that differs more from what we see in males?
Yeah. Well, as you just pointed out, it's not expected. Like when I said to you, I don't know, a few minutes ago, about one of the biggest threats for the women I work with is they want to see their grandchildren, and their kids say, well, sober up or you're never seeing them again. And that's like this huge threat. So who thinks of drunk grandma, right? I mean, right? And so the shame is so intense for women. I mean, I know that men feel shame. I understand that men have deep feelings and they feel shame, but it's not as socially acceptable. It's not as, right. We are supposed to be this, when you hear grandma, what do you think of, right? And so there you are, the grandmother who can't stop drinking. it's just unbearable, and you
Mhm.
can't share it, and you can't talk about it, and yeah.
Yeah. And that letting go of shame obviously being one of the things that's so crucial to really recovering from this.
Yeah.
How do you help women recognize when alcohol is kind of tipping past that, it's just for social, it's in control, into problematic territory? Because obviously that looks different for everyone. And I think maybe can be difficult for people to, not everyone has to hit a rock bottom, I would imagine.
No,
Might make it
no.
easier in the sense of like, this is obviously a problem, but I think like I see a lot of that dancing the line of, well, I'm not an alcoholic, but like it's more than I would like. I don't always feel in control. How do you kind of make that judgment and help guide someone into recognizing like, is this problematic?
I've actually never done that. Every person that's ever come to me and said, I have a problem, you got to help.
Right.
So I mean, I have had people, how do you know if you're an alcoholic? I go, the fact that you just asked me that question means you probably have a problem. Trust
Okay.
me. People who don't have problem don't ask that question. So, but I've never, the specific question you just asked, I've never helped anyone. I've never had anyone ask me to help them decide if they have a problem. People come to me when they have a problem.
Yeah. Well, and
So
that,
it's probably, maybe it's because, yeah. Go ahead.
no, I'm so sorry. We froze. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
No, no, I was actually done. I mean, yeah, it hasn't come up much. People just
Oh.
know, most people know when they have a problem. I think if you're waffling and you're unsure, then you probably do.
Yeah, if you have to ask.
Right?
Well,
You have to ask.
and as you said, I mean, I guess maybe more as your husband said, there's no like willing, forcing, loving it out of someone. Someone really has to be so ready. I mean, and I think too, I think often when we think of this, we maybe think of addiction, which alcohol obviously is a form of addiction, but I think we think of it more stereotypically with harder drugs. But that when you try to force someone to do that and they're not ready, it has a totally, often a counterproductive effect, and then what? Like, so the fact that he had that foresight, I think is a really, incredible thing. And you guys have clearly been through a lot. That's amazing. And I can't imagine his experience having read that book for the first time, but to know that someone is already, they've decided that they're ready to make a change, obviously, by the time that they reach out to you and maybe have taken all those steps that you did prior to really recovering, with the different sobriety programs and the AA and the 12 steps and everything. So I can anticipate your answer for this, but I'd like to hear it in your more eloquent words. Is wanting to get sober enough? How does a person know if sobriety is the right path for them? Because you very clearly wanted it many times, throughout the history of your addiction.
Allie, that is still a mystery to me. People will say that if you wanted it bad enough, you would get it. I I wanted it. I wanted it through my 30s, through my 40s. But I guess I didn't want it bad enough. For me, I wish I knew the answer to that question. I don't. When you find out, let me know. I
Well,
don't know.
but I think even
And
the fact that it took you like 11th time is the charm, just to show like the tenacity of not giving up, of continuing to show up after, what I'm sure, I do not want to label this, but for lack of a better word, like feeling as if it was failing, like it wasn't working, but you kept showing up and trying, and finally it stuck. I just think if anyone is listening going through that, like you don't know what time is going to be the time
yeah,
that will,
yeah.
and I imagine you can picture a life where you wouldn't have made it to 65 to retire on the path that you had previously been on, which must be pretty motivating as well.
Callie, if there's one message I could give people, just no matter what's happening, never give up. Never. Like, I don't know how I survived 11 trips, like all of that, all of those years, over 30 years. And through it all, I wanted to quit. I wanted to be sober. I wanted to be a different person. And there's so much suffering in there, like crying in your bed and every morning, or waking up in strange places, or all of that horror, all of it. And somehow I just never gave up. I don't know. That's one thing I seem to have been born with, is perseverance. And if you, no matter what's happened to you, anybody who's hearing my voice, where you're at, no matter how many times, just try one more time, always, because you never know.
Yeah, whether you have to.
I honestly thought I was going to die drunk, and I kept trying. I was like, oh my God, okay, I was right. I was like, yeah, whatever.
It was in there, just like waiting to get out. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important that you're saying this, because if someone's listening and they don't have addiction or haven't experienced it themselves, or maybe with someone close to them, we hear that, like, well, if they wanted to, they would, we hear it all the time. If they just had willpower, if they wanted it to, they would. But I know you're not a fan of some of these labels and using the word such as willpower. How do you broach that conversation? Why aren't you a fan of saying willpower?
Well, it doesn't work. If we could quit by willpower, I would have quit a long time ago. We can't. That's white knuckling, right? We're just trying to hold on as tight as we can and not drink, and that's hell. Willpower is not enough. I don't, desire doesn't seem to be enough. I hate to say this, but I have seen, well, for me, okay, so hitting that bottom, and for me, it was a threat of losing my career was enough. And I've seen women come into my program going, I want my grandchildren back in my life. It's enough. So is that what it is? I don't know. Is it that for everybody? No. For other people to go, oh, well, you know what? Screw you. Right. And it won't work for them. So it just, I honestly don't think there's a straightforward answer to any of these things. I really don't. And if I tried to put together all the answers and package it up and put it out in the world, it would just be a disaster. Right.
Yeah.
So I just, because
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and if it was that easy, we would have figured it out by now. And
Yeah.
would be struggling like with this, I think that's really important that you say you can respect certain programs that have worked for other people, but they were not the path that worked for you.
Yeah.
So that kind of key for lasting change is going to be different for
It is.
person. If someone's listening right now, I would like to ask you pieces of advice from two different angles. First, if someone's listening feeling like they are struggling with addiction, what can you tell them today as a little piece of advice?
My biggest piece of advice is get over the idea that you can do it alone.
Oh, wow.
That was what kept me until I got sober when I was 52 in 2018. And if I would have just surrendered to the fact that I need help and accepted the help, it didn't have to be the help that was offered, because it was very irritating to me, the way that people tried to help me through the years. But when I finally got, okay, I need help, and then got to seek out my own path, choose it and follow it, it worked. So for me, it was, instead of when people offer me help, I felt it was like, either I have to take what you're offering or do it myself. And so I would always, I can do it. Leave me alone. I got this. I'm an intelligent person. I got this. Don't bug me. I got it. And I couldn't do it. So I honestly don't think we can do it alone. But I always say this to my gals: pick the path that appeals to your heart, and then hold on to it like a bulldog, and don't let go until you get the results.
Love that. I really love that. It's just that it's not dichotomous. There's more than two options, on your own path, accepting the help of someone else, or seeking out someone else's help. And that sounds helpful with what you said, where it felt like it needed to be more autonomous for you. Like you had to be choosing this journey, not have it forced upon you. Incredible advice. Thank you. And now, if someone who is listening, supporting someone through addiction, maybe someone who's trying to sober up and get clean, what advice do you have for that group?
I think the best, I try and love them through it. We can't force them. My husband tried to love me through it, and it was the closest anyone ever came to helping me, because I would look at him and think, I'm hurting this man so much. He just loves me. All he wants is for me to be happy and healthy. And he never yelled, he never screamed, he never tried to stop me. He just, don't hurt yourself. Are you okay? How can I help? That kind of thing led me into a path of, I didn't do it for him, but it was the closest I ever came to feeling motivated doing it for someone else. So I know I didn't answer your question.
No, love them through it is beautiful advice. And I think as well that gives people the independence to love someone how they need to protect themselves, which can be
Yeah.
really so difficult with addiction. Some people need more space. Like, I'm going to love you, but now it's going to be over here for me, which is
Yes.
so challenging, like, yeah, this conversation makes me emotional because just it's so hard to know that people are hurting like that. And the fact that you guys have overcome that, both of you
Yeah.
together is so beautiful. When you look back on everything you've achieved and overcome, what are you the most proud of so far?
Having the courage to walk away from a really good career to go out into the world and help women on my own.
Beautiful. I'm so
Unexpected, but that's it. You'd think it would have been the addiction.
and do you know what I just personally want to say? I commend that choice that you made. I commend you so much because having gone from the life you were living, from 18 to into your early 30s, and then get this kind of like, okay, I did it. You've got like you're in the academia route, there's structure there, what life looks like. I can imagine a world in which it would be very tempting to just stay in the comfort of that for the rest of your life. So to then let go of that lifeboat and do your own thing is phenomenal. I'm just amazed
That
by
was
it.
very, very, very scary. And most people are like, you're crazy. That's a good gig. Why are you? And I'm like, I gotta go. I
You
gotta
know,
find my own way.
may I ask you, and you might not have an answer to this, but you sound like from 18-year-old Becca, you have had this intuition in you that you've known, like, I want to go to college. I want to, like you just have this little voice. And I wonder if it's gotten louder now over years of practice, and also now not having alcohol to dull that, where you really are able to listen to that intuition and inner voice now more than ever.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I it's such a I didn't expect to feel like this in recovery. I didn't know, because I literally was drunk for 32 years. I mean, I'm a bit of an exaggeration. I went to work, but you never sober up for any length of time. And so all that, imagine all the emotion, all that, the intuition, the voice, all of it, the health, the feel, all of it. I never experienced it. And I always say, oh my God, I feel better today than I did when I was 30, when I was 20, when I was 40. I feel my body feels better. I feel so healthy. I hike the mountains. Right. And yeah, you wake up. It's like you wake up when you finally recover, and this energy, and yeah, the intuition wakes up with you, and you just feel alive for the first time in your life. And I literally woke up in my late 50s. It's like, oh, is this what it's like? This is kind of cool. I can do this.
Yeah, what a just a
Crazy.
renewed sense of energy. Like you've got a whole brand new chapter now. Beautiful. What is next on the horizon for you?
No, I'm gonna do this. I'm good here for a while.
Perfect. I love, you're like, I'll be comfortable here. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, before you go, I want to ask you a few quick rapid fire questions. First being, if you consider yourself to have one, who is your biggest role model or someone you look up to?
I have so many. I think I'm going to go back to the beginning of our conversation and mention Yogananda.
Perfect.
I think of him when he came to America, he couldn't even speak English. And he was asked to speak in Boston at a religious thing. And the words came out of his mouth. But anyway, he built a worldwide organization from nothing and from no, and so I'm trying to build a little organization of my own, and so he inspires me.
Beautiful. What is the best advice you've ever received?
Relax and allow it to happen.
Ooh, I like that. Receive. That's important. Best book or resource that you'd recommend to people?
Right now, I'm actually reading or reviewing, I guess you would call, a book called The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence Scovel Shinn, which was published in 1925.
Oh, wow.
And I'm doing the next 10 snippets, 10 days in my podcast, walking my listeners through that book. It's
Oh,
about, yeah, it's a mindset book. She was a bohemian living in 1920s New York, artist, actress.
oh, I
She was
want to read.
amazing.
That sounds okay. I'm going to tune
Yeah,
in
yeah.
snippets because that, yeah, I just love.
Starts on Monday.
Do you
Yeah.
know what? This is why I knew I would get along with you. I love alliteration. Like you've got the from prostitute to professor, you've got your sobriety snippets. I appreciate that about you.
I love alliteration too.
Your personal mantra or words you live by.
Relax and allow. Same answer. I've
Perfect.
been saying that a lot to myself lately.
It's
I think
perfect.
we do have to let go. We really do have to let go more than we do. We try to control everything.
Yeah, I'm sure your yoga practice teaches you a lot, and that's
Yeah.
the art of meditation,
Yeah.
not being forced into that. And last but not least, for everyone who wants to learn more about you and follow what you've got going on, where can they do that?
Well, my podcast is called Sober Living Snippets. You'll find it on Apple or Spotify or any of them. My book is on Amazon. It's called Prostitute to Professor. And if you wanted to check out my website, it's beccajacobson.com.
Perfect. And we will link everything. Thank you so much. I have just truly thoroughly enjoyed our conversation so much. I can't express how much I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Carolee. Thanks for having me. I
Thank
appreciate it.
you.
And
And
good work you're doing as well.
oh, thank you. Well, only thanks to guests like you. I just get to be the vessel, for these stories to be told. It's you make my job easy, but I'm really looking forward to checking out your podcast, especially with this book right now. Sounds totally up my alley. So thank you for
Awesome.
doing this on a Friday. And I am just truly personally so happy that you are, living this beautiful life that you deserve after all that you've been through.
Thanks, Callie.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot.